Okay, this is chapter 6 on proteins, part 1. For review, once you finish looking at these slides and so forth, here are the important points to remember. The first one is that amino acids, there are 20 different amino acids, but only 9 are essential. In other words, we have to synthesize these from the other amino acids. We know there's 4 calories per gram. They do provide calorie, but we know that carbohydrate is a protein-sparing macronutrient, so we try not to use protein. Our bodies don't really store protein except for in tissues, which we need in muscle. So we try not to use it for that reason. So the parts of the protein I'll move back to this one. The things they have in common are they have an amino group, which means it has nitrogen in it. There is a carboxyl group, which is an acid, and there's a hydrogen, always connected to the carbon. And every amino acid, every 20 amino acid, the thing that's different was that R group. So this is the generic amino acid with the R group, but it changes for every one of the amino acids, so it gives it its personality or its characteristics. So this H, this is CH3, and there's several others, like this one has another branch, kind of a branch chain on here, more groups. So that's the one thing that's different, and that changes what the action of that amino acid will be. It also is true that some amino acids have sulfur in them, and sulfur is something you don't, most other macronutrients do not have. So some sulfur, and then they all have nitrogen. You can remember CHONS if you want: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sulfur. So remember, the shape is really important. So the amino acids are combined in a chain, and the chain might look like a necklace, just a straight chain, kind of like we talked about with glucose chains, but usually amino acid chains are then folded back on themselves to become a three-dimensional shape, and that is another thing that gives them their special function. So there's branch chain amino acids you might have heard of if you work out, that these are the 3 amino acids that have contain or give us more energy, we believe. So some people will take a protein, whey protein, that has branch chain amino acids in it. And so it's popular for these additional supplements. So they did show, from this study, they did show that this particular protein did help repair muscles and after a workout. So that's why it's been used as a supplement. So there's a branch chain, and that's what gives its function. So here, methionine and cysteine are 2 other amino acids that have sulfur in them. Here's your branch chain: isoleucine, leucine, and valine. You don't need to remember the names of these, but just to know there's different shapes and different functions. And then if you look at this, we can see that the way that these come together, these amino acids come together, could be called dipeptide, just like we have a glucose, which is a diglyceride, or a monoglyceride. There's a dipeptide. So peptides are proteins, glycerides were fats. So there's different lengths. So polypeptide is the most common, many amino acids in a chain. So you'll see those. Let me show you the picture here, 16. You'll see those in different functions. So here's an example. Well, let me go back to this one. So here, when we make new proteins, what it starts out is just copying the DNA chain, which is just a chain, which is a chain of polypeptides, which is not changed by shape. There's no new shape. It's just a chain of amino acids. So this is what's the transcription, it's called, in the DNA, in the nucleus of the cell. When you need to make a new protein, the DNA, which is the blue, kind of unzips, and the yellow, which is the RNA, can make an exact copy of what nucleotides were on the DNA. So each of these letters represents a nucleotide. So this yellow makes an exact copy, and after the copy is made, this can replenish and come back into its normal shape, the helix, double helix. So that does show you actually the shape of amino acids. They have different shapes, but anyway, once this RNA is made a copy, it moves the RNA out of the nucleus of the cell into the cytoplasm of the cell, and it reaches the ribosomes. We talked about this early on, that the ribosome is where new proteins are made. So the RNA strand goes to the ribosome here, and then the tRNA, the transfer RNA, will go around inside the cell, is all inside the cell, grab the amino acids that have been absorbed from your diet, and will pick them up and match them to the right, in the right order, in the right shape to this strand of RNA that has been copied from the DNA. So the DNA, transcribed by the RNA, it moves into the cytoplasm and is translated to a brand new, this is your brand new protein strand. This is how proteins are made inside the cell. So you need amino acids, you need these transfer RNA and messenger RNA. So the messenger carried the first piece right here out, placed it on the ribosome. The transfer RNA located the amino acids and brought them on, and then you form a new amino acid. So that's how that's formed. So every cell of your body has a particular order, particular type of protein that needs to be moved. So here's the review that the process of nucleus is called transcription. The DNA is copied by the RNA. The mRNA, the messenger RNA, moves to the ribosome in the cytoplasm. New proteins are built, and this new process is called translation. And then the transfer RNA, carries the proteins to the messenger RNA in the ribosome to make the new proteins. So you might want to review that. And then the next thing that's important to remember is that the shape, so this is the shape of a collagen, which is what most of the proteins in your body are, that gives you structure in your skin before you're wrinkly and before you get old. The collagen is what keeps your skin young looking. And this is a triple helix. It's kind of like 3 layers of, like a string, like a rope of proteins wound together. And then here is another picture of another amino acid. This is the amylase, which is the enzyme that helps. The enzyme is the protein. This is the starch. The enzyme can wrap around in just the perfect shape to fill around this starch, and then it can break the starch into pieces. So that's the enzyme that we know that breaks down starches. So that's a protein working on a carbohydrate. So then we can look at some, there might be some disorders where things don't work right. So maybe you have genetic problems with your DNA, so that you make the wrong shape, or you label a protein incorrectly. So here, the cystic fibrosis is an example, sickle cell anemia is an example, and phenylketonuria, or PKU, is a third example of genetic abnormalities to protein. So the cystic fibrosis is that you're unable to, people with this are unable to transport chloride properly, and so instead of having a nice kind of dilute mucus, it's very sticky, and so you can easily get lung problems, and it's easily interfering with digestion because the enzymes can't work as well because how thick the mucus is. So cystic fibrosis is just one alteration of a protein, as is sickle cell anemia. That's just one amino acid difference. So here's a normal hemoglobin, which is what carries oxygen in the blood, to a sickle cell. So this is one protein is different in that strand, and that's what causes the sickle cell. And this can't hold oxygen as well. So people with sickle cell often become sick easily because they don't have as much oxygen or iron in their blood. So the symptoms will be impaired vision, headaches, pain, infection. And then the third one is PKU. Is another genetic abnormality, and this is a missing enzyme. So in this case, enzymes are proteins. So without this phenylalanine hydrolase, this protein, phenylalanine, cannot convert to the next protein, tyrosine. So your body does not make tyrosine, but instead it gets a high level of phenylalanine in the brain. It's particularly dangerous and can cause mental retardation. So people on this diet can take a special formula that doesn't have phenylalanine in it. It's called phenol-free, and so they don't get this buildup. So this is a treatable genetic abnormality. And there's some more slides about that. Then just look at another thing important here is that PKU can lead to what they call conditionally essential amino acids. So since you can't make tyrosine, now all of a sudden what used to be a very easily made amino acid, you have to get it from something. You might need to get it from your diet because your body can't make it. So that's called conditional because it's conditional on the fact that you have a genetic abnormality. So you might hear that mentioned sometime. Proteins can easily be denatured because they are three-dimensional and because they are held together by hydrogen and sulfur bonds. Things that can break those down, and you'll know this when you cook. So for instance here, if you have heat, when you're making eggs, you can cook eggs, it turns from egg clear to white when you cook an egg white. That's why they call them egg whites. So that is altering the protein structure. pH, if you just put add a little acid, a little base, it can break down the amino acid structure. Just agitating, again back to egg whites, by just whipping egg whites without even cooking them, you can change the whole shape. Adding salt, metals, alcohol, all these things can affect the bonds between so that this normal structure can become totally different structure. Even though the amino acid stays together, amino acid chain stays together, this three-dimensional structure can easily be disrupted, and that's called protein denaturation, just to remind ourselves of that. And why is that important? Well, you can get illnesses. So if you have a fever, that's why it's dangerous to have a high fever, because it can actually denature muscle and liver proteins, and it can cause death. If you have too much acid in your stomach, you can denature proteins. If you have diabetes and you're not taking insulin, you can get a very low pH in your blood, and that can destroy organs. And then from even excess exercise, too much lactic acid buildup, too much alcohol can cause the same thing, and that can destroy your liver. So these things can happen with illnesses as well. We have this denaturation of proteins. And then in food, we talked about this last chapter, but we talked about gluten. Gluten is actually formed. It's not something that's, when you're making bread, you don't have gluten in bread until you take glutenin and gliadin and mechanically knead the bread, and that causes this gluten formation. So that's just taking a couple different proteins and forming another protein to help hold in the air and the moisture so that you have a nice light bread. So that's also. And then another thing that's important in this chapter would be the protein in foods. Like, where do we get protein in foods? So there's different quality of protein, just to know that if you're a vegetarian, then you might need different foods. So here the animal and plant proteins are a little bit different. They have not all the plant foods have every 9 essential amino acid. In meat, it always contains the 9 essential amino acids, but in plants and vegetables, you have to make sure to combine. I think soy products are pretty high. Quinoa is pretty high, almost a complete protein, and almost has all the 9 amino acids in it, but there's some foods that you need to combine. So because there's a limiting, so this is the best picture here, so you might have, of those 9 essential acids, you might only have a little bit of one of them. So because it's low, you can't make all the other amino acids. You can only go, it's called limiting, because you can only go as far as that one is present. So you need to add in here that shows they've added another food product that has the missing amount. So this lysine is very low, but by eating the right food, you can get more of it, and then you have the access to more amino acids. So that's what's called limiting proteins. And also, when you complete the proteins, to make complementary proteins means you're adding together different foods so you will get the right amount. So where legumes are low or deficient in methionine, you could eat nuts and seeds, which are not deficient, and you'll get complete protein. Or you can mix legumes with cereals and grains, since they don't have a deficiency, D for deficiency. So you can mix different plant foods to get a complete protein, and that's called complementary protein. So that's another concept that's good to know. So here's an example. So a peanut butter sandwich is considered complete protein because it's a legume and a grain, or lentils and sunflower seeds because legumes and seeds have complementary protein. So that's all for chapter 6, part 1. Those are the important things to review. All right, thank you.